Well, that's all right. I've still got it. Welcome to Bonnie, Scotland. I'm in the beautiful wee town of Huntly in Aberdeenshire. Now, if you're like me and you enjoy your golf, love a spot of fishing in the beautiful rivers here, and if you enjoy a wee dram of Scotland's finest scotches, then stick with me. I'm going to take you around the Whisky Trail, and I've got my wee chariot waiting for me just down there. So let's get started. Come on. Huntly sits on the edge of the world-renowned Whisky Trail. Set in the beautiful Scottish countryside, the trail takes on 7 world-famous working distilleries, 1 historic distillery, and a fascinating Speyside cooperage. We'll be learning more about some of the very exciting future plans for the wee town of Huntly, which sits a little over 100 miles north of arguably the most famous golf course in the world, the Old Course at St Andrews. First, it's time to learn why visitors flock from all over the world to go on the Whisky Trail. And we'll start by learning more about the history of the drink itself.
Here in the north of Scotland, it was a way for the farmer to get some money, turn their surplus barley crops into cash, because they were stuck halfway up a mountain, maybe 20 miles away from the nearest road. They can't transport all that grain. There's no roads, no carts, no nothing. So what they did, set up a little still in their farmhouse, turn their surplus grain into whisky, and then put a cask on each side of a horse, 20 miles down to the nearest town, turn it into cash, and there we are. They've got some cash, buy some things that they need that they couldn't have with their subsistence farming, and that's how it started.
As far as the whisky industry is concerned, it goes back a long, long way. The first recorded history of distillation is 1494. When you might move up here to the north, certainly when you move up into the Highland region, that was home to many of the famous illicit distillers going back into the 17th, 18th, 19th century. And they were renowned for just a beautiful, slow distillation, which allowed them a lovely fruitiness, lovely depth of character. So you've got all the perfect ingredients here you need in the northeast of Scotland. And the Cairngorm Mountains are only a few miles away, so that's your water source, but it also gave you that chance to hide away from the gaugers and from the customs officers that were coming round. You're only a few miles away from the sea, so it was easy to transport the whisky. The barley fields surround the area, those golden fields washing in the wind as they're coming through. And you've got the peat. This is nirvana. It doesn't get any better than this. It's the perfect location for making Scotch whisky.
Whisky and the game of golf go hand in hand. A beautiful course that sits just off the Whisky Trail is Cruden Bay.
We're in the northeast part of Scotland, just north of Aberdeen. I would say maybe 25 miles from Aberdeen, on a coast that's got loads of golf courses. We're very fortunate. We've got Royal Aberdeen, Merker, Trump, Newborough, then us. You wouldn't build a golf course like this nowadays. It just follows the lay of the land. We've got hidden holes, we've got a blind par 3, we've got a bathtub green, we've got a hole that you walk maybe 200 feet up into the air to play 1 golf hole, and then you come down the other side. But the view's worth it, I can assure you in that. Scotland's known as the home of golf, and it really brings in a huge number of visitors. It brings a lot of people in to the area, and the offshoot is the hotels are busy, the B&Bs are busy, the restaurants are all busy. You know, it's very, very good for the tourism industry. You know, we've got the golf here, the whisky, very busy with the whisky as well. A lot of the golfers come, do a bit of golf, and then they'll go and have a day in a whisky distillery, so they enjoy themselves.
Having been part of the club since he was a young lad, Les has lovingly created a small museum in the old clubhouse that documents the history of this very special place.
This is the current clubhouse, and this here is the clubhouse we're in just now on our first tee. That hotel was a grand hotel. All and sundry came here way back in the early 1900s. We had Jeremiah Coleman, we had some of the prime ministers would come here, and it was a very, very affluent place to come. They used to come up to Aberdeen, take the train from Aberdeen to Cruden Bay, and then they had their own tram that took them to the hotel.
We'll be right back after the break as we continue our journey on the Whisky Trail. I've had the privilege of playing some of the most wonderful fairways of the world. And I always knew that later in life, I would have a business that will create amazing courses. That company is Faldo Design. We now have a portfolio in excess of 30 courses around the world. For more information on how you could become a part of our legacy, please visit nickfaldodesign.com. Welcome back. Having learned about the history of whiskey and visited the beautiful Cruden Bay Golf Club, it's time to drop in on our first distillery on our tour. The Strathisla Distillery, the home of Chivers, is in the town of Keith, which is the oldest continually operated distillery in the Scottish Highlands, having been founded in 1786. It can produce more than 2 million litres of Scotland's national drink every year. From Keith, we travel 17 miles to Elgin and the home of Glen Moray.
So the Whisky Trail is a collection of distilleries promoting the area, not so much focused on the brands, so hoping that people will come to the Speyside area and then travel throughout and visit different distilleries. And we also promote what this region has. Wonderful golf courses, great kind of coastline to go beach walking, fantastic restaurants, and tapping into our local food expertise as well. Some wonderful beef and lamb and everything that this area is famous for. So we're here to promote the region as much as we are the distilleries, and hopefully if the region is thriving, then people will come and visit us here at the distillery also. So the history of the distillery, we started life on site here as a farm back in the 1820s, then converting from farming into brewing was our first step into alcohol back in 1834 as the Elgin West Brewery. Quite a large brewery for the time, exporting across Europe, and then ultimately converting into a distillery in 1897. The first drops of our spirit coming through our stills on the 13th of September in that year. Over the years, the distillery has expanded and grown in size, and as we've allowed this expansion to take hold, we've implemented some modern techniques, kind of hybridizing the traditional approach with what is now considered slightly more modern techniques around heat recovery within production, making us more efficient and a greener distillery at the same time. So the history of Glenmurray, we've been operating here on our site in Elgin, the heart of Speyside, since 1897. Exporting across the world for many, many years as Glenmurray single malt whisky. Producing a style of spirit quite typical of the area and the region, which balances the lovely kind of sweet spice characteristics, which is synonymous with Speyside as an area of whisky production. For me, if you're coming to visit us, you've always got to try our 18-year-old. I think it's a great example of one of these whiskies which does the simple things really well. You know, while we talk about experimental, while we tap into an experimentation with casks, the 18-year-old takes it back to the traditional style, and it's just got a lovely characteristic. And for me, it's just a great kind of hold in Speyside. So while you're tasting Glenmurray, you're also getting a good feel for this region as a whisky producing region.
Whisky accounts for 80% of Scotland's food and drink exports and is worth more than $4 billion to the Scottish economy.
If you're driving from distillery to distillery, you stop somewhere at a hotel, stay overnight, speak with the locals, go to the bar, have a pint, look at the beautiful scenery, see some of the wonderful things that Scotland has. So it's great to get people coming in and seeing Scotland.
I'm down in the dungeons of Duncan Taylor, and this is Ian Logan, and this fine blend is from 66. So do tell us about Lochside, because it's gone now, it's from yesteryear.
To be honest, Sir Nick, when you get whiskies like this, it's a privilege to be able to taste them and work with them. It's been gone for perhaps 30 years now, located down Montrose, Brechin area. So fantastic barley grown country, great water, ideal for making whiskey.
It's quite light in
Yeah.
taste, which is nice. You know, I think I love to have I'd call it my daily tipple, so it's not going to knock you over. Have a wee quick dram, you know, maybe at 11 o'clock to start the day.
No, it's liquid history. Many of the people who made that whiskey have sadly passed on.
Yeah, that's true.
So this is them, got the liquid in the cask, and it's basically saying, no, this is how good our whiskey was. You keep up the standards as well.
So hopefully the old boys will be very impressed that we're upholding the traditions, and it's 11:20, so it's time for a wee dram. Having started the show in the town of Huntly, here's Sean Smith, who plans to make the town a must-visit for anyone who finds themselves in this beautiful part of Scotland.
Town of Huntly, in my mind, is kind of one of these things where it has a lot of potential, but it's been, you know, the oil industry's been struggling. The way that they've constructed some of the freeways, or constructed freeways in the first place, Huntly's not front and center of all the traffic as it used to be. And so I think the city could use this rejuvenation. So what we're really hoping the town square, where we've acquired several properties, and with the Castle Hotel, that we can kind of pump some life into the town. It's a fantastic town, but it's gotten a little bit overlooked by the kind of a downfall and just traffic coming through the town.
It's time to visit the home of golf, St Andrews. And no one knows more about the great game in this famous old town than Angela Howe of the World Golf Museum, located right next to the first tee of the Old Course.
So the museum, it's the R&A World Golf Museum, and it was established by the Royal and Ancient Golf Club. It opened in 1990, so we have a very direct link with the club and with the R&A. And people come to St Andrews on golfing pilgrimages, where previously they came on religious pilgrimages, and if they can get a tee time on the Old Course, it really makes that experience memorable for the rest of their lives. So if you're on that golfing pilgrimage, or if you're just coming, you know, to soak in the atmosphere of the town and learn a bit about the game and about the social history of the game as well. It's not pure golf. There's lots of wonderful things to see in the museum. When there was still only one course, it was 22 holes, 11 out and 11 back. And then in 1764, and this is recorded in the minutes of the Royal and Ancient Golf Club, the golfers decided that it would be for the good of the game if they reduced the first 4 holes, made them 2 holes, and then it became an 18-hole course. So the original prize that was given to the Open champion was a belt. It was a red Moroccan belt with a big silver buckle in front and with a golfing image engraved on it, and medallions, all very elaborate looking. And it was presented up until 1870, when it was won outright by young Tom Morris. And that's because the rules of the competition stated that if anybody won 3 years in a row, they would keep the belt. Today's winner is presented with the Claret Jug, which is the iconic trophy. We like to think the most iconic trophy in golf. So this year it's been the 150th playing of the Open Championship. It was a really special occasion, and the weather was utterly fabulous. We just couldn't have asked for better, and it was still challenging. It was a great championship.
Join me after the break when we continue our tour of the Whisky Trail. I've had the privilege of playing some of the most wonderful fairways of the world, and I always knew that later in life I would have a business that will create amazing courses. That company is Faldo Design. We now have a portfolio in excess of 30 courses around the world. For more information on how you could become a part of our legacy, please visit nickfaldodesign.com. Welcome back. Having visited a number of whiskey distilleries already earlier in the show, it's time to learn more about the hugely important part of the whiskey production process, and that is coopering.
Coopering is important because 70 to 80% of the flavour comes from the wood, so it's a huge portion of the flavour. And the wood in the cask is a really important element in the whole process. Traditionally, more widely used is American oak, because with bourbon, you're only filling the cask once, and then the cask is spent in their eyes, but it's great for us. So we'll take that cask and then we'll fill it as much as 3 times, usually first or second fill. And then we're getting all the goodness out of that cask, so you still get a lot of the sweetness from the bourbon, but then there's still a lot in the wood as well that will impart flavour onto the spirit. So there's American oak, and then there's European oak, which is slower growing, so it's a tighter grain, and tends to be a bit more acidic, a bit more higher on the tannins level. So that means you get more of the spicy flavours, the fruits, the kind of heavier, richer flavours coming through from the European oak.
Speyside Cooperage welcomes visitors from all over the world every year who want to learn more about this very traditional art of coopering.
A cooperage is a factory, a workshop if you want, that we take casks, we repair, rejuvenate and sometimes build new casks depending on customers' requirements. Speyside Cooperage started in Craigellachie, the small village of Craigellachie, in 1947. Customers will have stock in our yard where they will then either call up or email and ask for a certain type of cask, or they'll need them rejuvenated, which means we will then rechar the inside of the cask to give them another life cycle. To be quite honest, there were no cask, no whisky.
Malcolm's always been like a family friend with my parents, so he got a chat to my dad one day and says, take him down and see how he gets on, and ever since then I've been here. But I always wanted to learn, I was always doing extra hours, I was always coming in on Saturdays. I just one of that jobs that I was enjoying coming to, so I always enjoyed learning. It's an early start, up at 5:15 in the morning, bit of breakfast, walk a dog, then I come down here for 10 to 6, help all the labourer lads get the place set up, get machines going, ready for the coopers coming in. So they come in back at 6 and we just give them a hand to get going.
The beautiful countryside and crystal clear mountain waters of this part of Scotland makes it the perfect environment in which to produce some of the finest whiskies in the world. These distilleries now blend traditional ways of distilling whiskey with more modern day practices to enable them to both increase production and keep up demand from across the world.
One of the things that attracted me to Duncan Taylor was I knew Ewan Shand, our owner, for over 25 years. I know his mindset and how he looks at these things. Now, we talk a lot about whiskey without compromise. So everything we do will be non-chill filtered. In other words, it's taken straight from the cask and straight into the bottle. No colouring, like some of our competitors may do. So no, we're trying to be as open and honest with the consumer as much as we can. The consumers nowadays are more knowledgeable than they've ever been. It's very, very difficult to get around them. So why do that? Do the opposite thing. Be open, be transparent with them and talk to them about what they want. You look at the innovation that's coming along. The work we're doing with Sir Nick, for example, is a brilliant version of that. Our octave casks are renowned around the world, these small 80-litre casks we do, producing really, really small batches, all unique, and an amazing inventory of whiskey. Now, there's 1966. Now, ask yourself, what were you doing in 1966? I wasn't born. But when you start to think about the age statement and what's happened over all those years, you see how the world's developed and you see how you develop along with it as well. So there's so many different aspects come into it, but to work for a small company like Duncan Taylor, when you know everything you do has an effect on the finished result, and a company that thinks a little bit outside the box, it's great fun.
Well, I had a passion for whiskey myself, and I'd been out investing in buying casks for myself for a personal collection. And a few years ago, probably circa 2018, I ran across the most fantastic selection of whiskeys available in the market. I'd never seen anything like it. And it was actually that selection that was from Duncan Taylor. And that kind of led me in this funny path to meeting Andrew Shand, Ewan's son, and Ewan. And that was how I got involved with Duncan and Taylor. It was how I found out about them and their kind of interest in taking on an investor.
Make sure you join me after the break as we complete our journey of the Whiskey Trail. I've had the privilege of playing some of the most wonderful fairways of the world. And I always knew that later in life, I would have a business that will create amazing courses. That company is Faldo Design. We now have a portfolio in excess of 30 courses around the world. For more information on how you could become a part of our legacy, please visit nickfaldodesign.com.
Coming up next, an all-access pass documenting all of the drama as we follow a special group of golfers chasing their dream of making the PGA Tour. One Shot Away, presented by Korn Ferry, is next, right here on CBS.
Welcome back, and welcome to the River Devon, which runs through the ancient town of Huntley. I'm down on the riverbank with Malcolm Littler, and you have walked these banks for many years. Nobody's really knows this area better than you. Do tell me.
I was born and grew up on this farm. This is Huntley Lodge Farm, which is the old home farm of the Huntley Lodge estate.
Okay.
And my grandfather bought this stretch of river in 1944. And then my parents came back from Australia, and we farmed this farm until 1983.
And you fished this river much?
I have when I was a younger man.
There's some good trout in here and salmon.
This is one of Aberdeenshire's great salmon and trout rivers, the Dee, the Don, the Devon. So brown trout, sea trout, salmon. Maybe not as many salmon as there once was, but hopefully that's going to turn with all the conservation measures they've got in place now.
Yeah, it's a pretty spot, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a pretty spot. You've got some ospreys down the river here, and Slovakian crested grebes, which are incredibly rare. There's only 28 nesting pairs in Scotland, and they're on the stretch of the river. Of course, we've got heron, duck, we've got gosanders and all sorts of other birds.
Gee, I'm going to have to get my ornithologist book out, aren't
Absolutely.
I? Yeah, well, I will do that, and I'm going to head up the river and see what I can discover from this fabulous, gorgeous spot. A key part of the development plans for Huntley centre around the Castle Hotel.
This is the Castle Hotel, formerly known as Huntley Lodge, and it was the principal home of the Gordon family, and was in fact the home of the last Duchess of Gordon. So the building as we see it today was originated in the mid-17th century, and then it was added to a number of times. And then Archibald Simpson, a very prominent Scottish architect, he worked on this building. He worked on the Gordon Schools, which is a very famous building in this community. And he also worked on the Bank Restaurant, which is another Duncan Taylor property.
I think success for Huntley, if we do things right, is when people in the Highlands, in Aberdeen at the airport, or Inverness, or somebody on the Whiskey Trail, the tour guides, the people involved, when they mention Huntley, they're going to say, now that's a place that you have to go. You have to go to the Castle Hotel. You have to go to the bar there. We're going to have a fantastic bar with just majestic tree-lined down to the River Devon. So our success is that Huntley becomes a must place for the Whiskey Trail, where people are going to go and they're going to be really creating their experience in Scotland, having Huntley and the Duncan Taylor whiskey experience be central to their visit to the Highlands.
My goodness, it's just like being a pro golfer out on tour. The camera crew is in the way. I've caught up with the sound man. So I want to thank you for joining me on this wonderful tour, the Whisky Tour of Scotland. Do come and visit. It is fantastic. Start in dear old little Huntly. Come and visit us. And I'm going to head up the river for a bit of peace and quiet, tranquility, and see if I can catch myself a beautiful trout. So thank you for joining me. Cheers.